Welcome back to An Emerging Forest on the Spiritual Unity Radio Network. We hope everyone was able to stretch their legs and get a drink. And now, back to Alan.
Welcome back, everyone, and let's launch into the second half of this really awesome show by talking about the Experimental Farm Network. And take it away, Nathan.
All right. Well, thanks very much again. Really happy to be here. So the Experimental Farm Network is the nonprofit that Dusty Hinz and I started in 2013. The idea, again, was to create a platform to facilitate collaboration on sustainable agriculture projects, especially plant breeding projects, to develop plants for climate change mitigation. Staple crops that can be used to help sequester carbon in the ground, excess carbon from the atmosphere. Plants are the best, most natural tool that we have at our disposal to do that. You hear about all of these ridiculous geoengineering projects people talk about to fight climate change that are going to have all kinds of unintended consequences. When we know that we have at our disposal through a regenerative agriculture system to actually sequester the excess carbon from the atmosphere that we need, we might even be able to take out enough to stop global warming. It sounds far-fetched, but combined with some common sense things as far as conservation and reduction of emissions, we could use our agricultural system as a powerful tool to fight climate change. So, I knew for a long time about efforts to develop perennial wheat through the years. People have been working on it for over 100 years, and a lot of them have gotten really far, and they've developed some perennial grain crops. Some of them existed 50 years ago, but the seeds were lost because the funding was lost and the research stopped, and people thought that it was never going to be as lucrative as annual wheat, so they stopped working on it. But people are interested in it again, and organizations like the Land Institute in Kansas have been working to domesticate a wheatgrass, which is a wheat relative, and they've created this grain they call kernza that's being used now already to make alcoholic drinks and certain other things that there's bakers experimenting with using it in bread, and lots of farmers are starting to grow the stuff. It's got a much smaller seed than wheat, but it is viable, and it's a start. It's the first thing that the Land Institute has introduced in the decades that they've been around. But they're working on perennial sunflowers as a temperate perennial oilseed crop. There is a perennial oilseed out there that unfortunately is causing huge problems, and that's palm oil, because there's massive deforestation happening to create these palm oil plantations. But you can see that something that is a plant that lives year after year and produces a crop year after year, you don't have to till the soil, you don't have to replant, actually can have some immense value. But there are way more sustainable ways than palm oil that we could be doing it, and we need to do a lot more research and a lot more development of sustainable crops, especially for our temperate climate up here in the north, so that we're not growing corn and soy with massive chemical inputs and constant tilling of the soil. So on EFN, the idea is we have a website that anybody can join. anybody can post a project on there that is looking for volunteers, and then anybody else can create a profile and volunteer for one of those projects. The first project that's up there right now, the first one that we put up there, is a perennial grain sorghum project that I put up there. Sorghum is a really amazing plant. It's a staple crop in parts of Africa and India. It's a gluten-free grain. It has many varieties have a stalk that is full of sweet sap and can be pressed to squeeze out juice and boiled down to make molasses. The grain is higher protein than corn. The plant requires just 1/7 the water of corn, and it grows in marginal land. It needs much less fertility in the soil to get a good crop. A lot of farmers use it as a cover crop and crosses with Sudan grass, which is a wild sorghum relative. Grown with legumes like cowpeas, sorghum makes a really fantastic cover crop, and tilled into the soil, the sugars in that stalk are wonderful for the microorganisms. They love feeding on that stuff. So it's a plant that a lot of farmers are already familiar with. A lot of people already grow it. It's actually the fourth most common grain grown in the United States. It's grown for animal feed primarily and bird seed. But perennial sorghum, temperate perennial sorghum, is already a reality. These things have been developed, but they have not been commercialized yet. And we're working with an experimental strain that we got from folks in Oregon a few years ago, and we have one single plant that survived our New Jersey winter last winter. Where our fingers are crossed that we're going to see it sprouting within a few weeks here for having survived its second winter. But of course, we saved seeds from that surviving plant, and we have a whole bunch more that we're going to be planting this year from that surviving plant, so that we can do work on improving it and finding ones that have better agronomic capabilities, that are bigger seeds, easier to thresh, things like that. So we're really, really excited about that, and it's going to be a fun project. So we have that project listed up on the website, and anybody can call in and jump on the website, create a profile, join that project, and we'll send you some of those seeds. And plant breeding is really finding a needle in a haystack often. So it's something that the more people you have looking, the more chances you have of finding that needle.
So what are some of the other projects that you have, or some of the other projects that maybe someone just put up there themselves, sort of external to Dusty and yourself?
Sure. So some of the other projects that we've put up there include a chinkapin chestnut project. That's a native species of chestnut that has a much smaller seed than the common domesticated forms of chestnut, but it's a native species that is a lot more resistant to the blight that killed most of the American chestnuts. It's native in the southeast, as far north as southern New Jersey and central New Jersey. So we're really excited about that one. It's really delicious. It's a nut that you can actually eat raw, a chestnut that you can eat raw. It's quite tasty. We have a project up about jojoba, which is a desert plant from the southwest, and it actually is that's one of these oil seeds that could replace petroleum, but it is just not grown at nearly the quantity. and there hasn't been enough research done. There hasn't been enough breeding work done to improve the crop. It was originally touted in the 70s as a replacement for sperm whale head oil, which was a major industrial product used for all kinds of things, from candles to grease in machines. But that's something that grows it's native to the Sonoran Desert to the southwest. It is a perennial plant, a big bush. It actually thrives in drought years. Quite a few of the plants are frost resistant, so it can even handle a light frost 3 days in a row. With this changing climate, even places that don't historically get that kind of weather are going to be facing that. That's one of the big problems with climate change. We have a project up there about May apples, which are a native woodland plant. They grow in the shade on forest floors, damp forest floors, and that's a really cool plant. It's got a really delicious fruit, but it's particularly interesting and particularly useful because every other part of the plant, except for the flesh of the ripe fruit, has a toxin in it called podophyllin toxin that was one of the first chemotherapy agents, and it is still used as cancer medicine. But that podophyllin is often harvested from plants in the wild in Asia that are relatives of the North American May apple. So if we can breed May apples that have a higher podophyllin content, it would take a lot of the pressure off of those wild populations in Asia. And it would also, because it's a really interesting and delicious fruit, is another plant that could be grown. And it grows on forest floors, so it's taking up land that's not otherwise taken up, that's not being used for other forms of agriculture. Some of the other projects we have up there, we have a few rice projects that other people put up, and Dusty has been managing those on the site. We have he can talk a little bit more about those. We have a perennial kale breeding project that somebody in Oregon, a really amazing plant breeder named Chris Homanix, put up there. That's an awesome project. It has it's the most diverse collection of perennial kale germplasm that's ever been put together, and it's really beautiful. People can check it out and see that it's.
Mark, do you have a beer?
They can see how that it's got really beautiful diversity there. And there are a couple of other cool projects up there. There's one for yamberry. That's a Dioscorea. It's like a yam is not like a sweet potato. But it is also a tuberous plant, and it looks awfully like a sweet potato. But most yams are tropical, native to Africa, and there are other yams in other parts of the world that produce these aerial tubers that are also edible, like small potatoes in the air. And Eric Tonesmeyer, who I mentioned earlier, and who was one of the people who inspired this whole project, actually posted that project up there. So right now we have, I believe, 15 projects up, and we're really excited to get more.
So I'll bring Dusty into the broadcast at this point. Hi, Dusty. How are you this evening?
Hey, good. How you doing? Sorry, I'm on Central Time. I totally got mixed up here.
You made it just in time. So why don't you talk about? I mean, Nate already talked about his background. Why don't you talk about your background for a few minutes?
Yeah, my background is I grew up in a suburb of the Twin Cities. And I went to Augsburg Minneapolis. And I got into urban farming 1 year in Minneapolis before I moved to Philly. And I moved to Philly with an ex-partner. I really kind of got into it was to begin with urban farming, and now now I've got into like larger scale stuff in like rural areas. But really, I got into farming from very much like a political, social perspective. I just felt like it was a very tangible, practical way for people to try to like gain more autonomy over their day-to-day lives. And so I moved. I was in Minneapolis for one growing season, moved to Philly, and that was kind of like coinciding with the Occupy movement. I actually moved to Philly 5 days after Occupy Philly started. And really, I don't think I'd be probably sitting here talking to you right now if it wasn't for Occupy. Like, everything kind of like flowed from there for me because I was new in Philly, and I kind of like just met a whole bunch of people, kind of fell in with like the radical gardener niche crew, and one thing led to the next. I met Nate through that, and then we branched after a couple of years of doing some urban farming stuff and guerrilla gardening in Philadelphia. I branched out with Nate down to South Jersey, where we farmed for 4 years and co-founded the Experimental Farm Network, and we started this small seed selling operation. And I actually, just a couple months ago, moved back to Minnesota to Badger Set Research Farm, which is a hazelnut chestnut pecan-focused farm. And I could explain more about that, but that's kind of, in a nutshell, my story.
So that's a very interesting pun you just made there with moving back to a hazelnut, chestnut, and pecan farm, and encapsulating that by saying that's your story in a nutshell.
Exactly.
We're not talking about eggs. We're talking about nuts. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing in Minnesota?
Sure. So I had always kind of imagined coming back to Minnesota. It's where I'm from. So I am inheriting some land here, and I don't exactly know what's going to kind of happen with that. And I'm not at that land now. But I had known about Badger Set Farm and Philip Rudder and the work that he's doing for like quite some time, and then I kind of on a whim tried to reach out to them to see if I could come volunteer a couple years ago. I happened to be back in Minnesota for like 10 days, and I had like 10 free days open, and I was able to come here, meet Philip, meet Mark, the in-house the main worker guy here, and I came back that was during the harvest season of 2016, and I came back in January for a couple of meetings where I solidified organizing like this work. I called it a Work for Education exchange, and that was something that I organized this past summer. I got a group of 10 people to come here, and I was still living in Jersey back in the summer, but I came here for a month to Minnesota in the summer. And the idea was we were going to we plant a bunch of trees and do on-farm work here. Philip gave lectures and stuff, so it was kind of like a work for education trade or something, because so oftentimes these permaculture design certificates and other things out there I feel like can be very like cost prohibitive for a lot of people. And anyways, it was a kind of like a cool opportunity to try to organize something that was like really valuable and useful, and like people got to learn directly from this guy who's been breeding these things and working with these tree crops for 35 years, and get to do it, and actually get to do. And actually, one of the critiques I hear of these PDCs oftentimes is they're not hands-on enough. People are just getting like talked to or whatever. So people were able to learn here and do tangible, real like on-farm agroforestry work, and learn while doing it, and it was like super affordable. So that went pretty well in the summer, and I had kind of been thinking, this was even before this happened in the summer, but I had been thinking, hey, I kind of want to move back to Minnesota. and moved to this farm. So over the course of the rest of the summer and the fall, I kind of solidified like a kind of a business type arrangement with Philip, and then early January made the move back here to Minnesota. I was out by my parents for a few months, but now I am down here at the farm, and here at Badger Set, I'm still going to be growing annuals. I like to grow annuals. We sell a lot of annual seed, and so definitely still doing that, and they've given me this little plot of land where I can, like, grow on, and Nate was nice enough to let me use the BCS, not use it, take it with me, our small, like, walk-behind tractor. I took that with me back here to Minnesota so I can kind of, like, go on to a new, fresh patch of land and just do what I have to do on a small scale with that. I also, Mark and I here at the farm are working on coppicing hazelnut. Coppice is when you cut hazel or any tree to the ground and let it grow back up from the roots. And what you're left with when you coppice hazelnut bushes are beautiful, long, straight, hard, skinny branches or stems, rather. And these are, I'm trying to, and I've actually already started making some sales. I have some ads on Craigslist. I'm trying to sell these as like bamboo of the north and try to sell it to like gardeners and folks for building trellises with. At least that's one of the initial things that I'm trying to sell it as. So, so here at Badger Set, the plan is to learn a whole bunch, grow annuals, try to market wood products like from coppice, like hazelnut stakes, but there's also coppice that needs to be done of chestnut, and you can make biochar or chestnut charcoal with that. And then planning to try to help out here with harvest, being a part of harvest, trying to get pecan and chestnut to market, and just kind of diving into just, in some cases, whatever needs to be done. They have Icelandic sheep here, helping out with that, maybe learning a thing or two here and there with Icelandic sheep and horses. And also, first time living off the grid, really, although I guess me and Nate did live off the grid one summer at the farm in Jersey. We kind of, like, did that a little bit. But this is kind of like going to be, like, for real, living in a tiny house. I mean, we have to fetch water from the greenhouse. Any electricity is from solar panels, and that's the situation here.
Sounds very exciting.
It is definitely going to be a wild ride. I think it was the right time to head out of Philly. It was great. Like, I absolutely love Philadelphia and South Jersey and the people that I met there. It was an awesome experience there, but I kind of felt like it was time to move on to like a new chapter, to explore like a new place and learn new things. Keep life interesting.
Wow. So we're very close to an hour, and so I think that we've covered most of what we wanted to cover, and that's really awesome. So, Nate, do you have any things that you want to say? And then I'll circle back amongst all of us to get everybody's contact information. But I think this is a really well-timed first introductory show. We can certainly do follow-up shows, more in-depth shows about particular content. That is certainly welcome. But I think as an overview show and as an introduction to the two of you and to EFN, this is a really good first show. So go ahead, Nate.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm really, really happy we were able to do it. I would just say I really would urge anybody who's interested in what we're doing to check out our website. Again, that's www.experimentalfarmnetwork.org. You can check out our seed store website as well, which is the word store, STORE, .experimentalfarmnetwork.org. Actually, I believe I got efnseeds.com working as well. It took a little while to get them linked up, but yeah, you can go to efnseeds.com, and that will automatically redirect you to the website. It's easier to remember. And we've got some really awesome seeds on that site, and all of the sales go to support the nonprofit. So we really hope that folks will buy some seeds. It's not too late to plant most of the seeds we have on here. It's getting a little bit late for the tomatoes in a lot of the country and the peppers and the eggplants, but for, things like lettuce, kale, squash, sorghum, okra, legumes, there's all sorts of things that people could still order and plant, and Dusty's brother will get the seeds out to you as fast as possible. So would love it if people check that out. And please, folks who are interested, do check out my campaign website at nateforcongress.com, NATEFOR Congress.com.
So, Dusty, do you want to give ways folks that can get in touch with you and talk a little bit more about the organization Badger Set Farm?
Sure. I'll start with just talking about Badger Set, I guess. And you can close with the contact info. Well, really, Badger Set is the brainchild of Philip Rudder. He completed his coursework for a PhD in biology, and Mark was just talking in the background. Genetics, evolution, and ecology is what Philip Rudder has a PhD in. He actually didn't complete a thesis, but he took all the coursework. And he moved down here he went to the University of Minnesota. He moved down to southern Minnesota and purchased this farm in the early 70s. And really, first thing he did was he looked at not maybe the first thing he did, but one of the first things he did is he looked into the soil survey. And just after World War II, compared with how the land was in the early 70s, after 30 years of annual corn and soy agriculture, this farm had lost over 20 inches of topsoil. We're in the driftless region, and the soil here is super silty and soft and will just melt away. And it's also very the driftless region, which comprises it comprises southeastern Minnesota, northeastern Iowa, and then a little bit of northwestern Illinois, and then a chunk of southwestern Wisconsin. So it's this region where the glaciers never hit, and it's very hilly and it's bluff country. And so this farm, he came here, and it's he was kind of looking at it hey, this is essentially suicidal. This is so wrong-headed that we would just be doing this corn and soy agriculture and literally melting away this precious topsoil into the Mississippi River. And so he's basically some proven alternative needs to try to be needs to try to be achieved or to be discovered and researched, and just so he's been plugging away for 35 years trying to breed hazelnut, chestnut, and to a lesser extent hybrid pecan. He's also growing those here as well, but the lion's share of the focus has been on hazelnut, and then also chestnut. And the idea of these tree crops is basically, hey, let's do perennial agroforestry where we don't have to till the soil every year, and no chemicals are sprayed here. So he's breeding these tree crops to exist in essentially like quasi-wild system. Insect populations here thrive, and they get great nut harvest. And actually, interestingly enough, Philip is also very much like critical of just like permaculture, like as like just some like little. He sees it as just like some little like boutique, like backyard, suburban type edible landscaping thing. Oh, it's like, oh yeah, but is it? But what is being done to change corn and soy fields to like something else? So, like the big picture, like the big scale, like what could be done to stop corn and soy and do this like alternative thing that would actually be like a good thing that could still produce important human calories. And I'll talk a little bit more. I'll dive in a little bit more about the hazelnuts, and just briefly, like they have maybe the best chance to possibly just become like some type of perennial staple food crop that was brought to scale maybe in something like the Midwest here. Like there's 60 to 70% oil, and we could have like the olive oil of the North that would be in every grocery across the Midwest, and if it was brought to scale with the proper harvesting machinery, processing. So that's kind of been Philip's that's been his whole vision, and that's been what he's been working towards. He had developed his own term that he uses called woody agriculture, and he's very much been in the business of trying to like create a serious, viable alternative that like that corn, like, and he's mainly been trying to. He's less concerned about, you know, suburban permaculture people or something like that, or whatever. He's been trying to like prove a model to existing corn and soy farmers, and so that's basically what the vision has been here. Chestnut, you can make, like if it was produced on a larger scale, you can make like cornmeal or flour with it, and is like very much like nutritional and healthy. Both these things, hazelnut and chestnut are also pack a punch with like the just like the vital like human calories that they would like offer up as like an alternative to corn and soy. So I came here to this operation here also needs help, and it's like I came here to come here, help out, collaborate, learn, and try to, you know, push this envelope of perennial, you know, Midwest agroforestry staple food crops. And so, you know, that's basically, I'm still going to be doing annuals and everything, but I kind of wanted to come here because it was kind of pushing towards that bigger like paradigm shifting type action. So that is basically, you know, what's happening here. People can find me on Facebook if they want. Dusty Hinz, that's DUSTY space HINZ. That's maybe the best place to find me. I'll continue being on Facebook and whatnot. And that pretty much is all I have to say.
Well, thank you both so much for being on the show, and thank you everyone out there in the audience and those who listen in the future. This has really been a really informative show. My name is Alan Ritter. I'm the host of An Emerging Forest. I run a small produce club in the Philadelphia region. It's serving West Philadelphia at present and southern New Jersey, using sourcing wholesale commercial agriculture products, fruits and veggies, supplying them to folks at large discounts compared to standard groceries like Whole Foods or Wegmans. If you want to get in touch with me, my email address is ritter.alan88@gmail.com, or you can go to produceclub.us if you're in the service area, and that will take you to a Facebook page to join the club. Thank you, Dusty, and thank you, Nate, for being on the show.
Thank you, Alan.
Keep up the good work.
And everyone out there, have a great week, and see y'all soon. If I don't put the closer.
Thanks for listening to the Spiritual Unity Radio Network. Join us 7 nights a week for exciting programming covering a variety of expressions of faith. And remember, all manifestations of the divine are equally valid.
Put a new face on an old kitchen. The Home Depot's cabinet experts can reface your kitchen cabinets for a mini makeover in a fraction of the time. And right now, you can get an extra 15% off. Our licensed local experts can get the job done right away. So don't face another year in an outdated kitchen. Try refacing it. Get huge savings now. Only at the Home Depot. More saving, more doing. Offer valid through April 25th, 2018. License numbers available at homedepot.com/license numbers.